Karoline Leavitt woke up early that Tuesday morning in her small, Washington, D.C. apartment. The spring sun peeked through her curtains as she reached for her phone on the nightstand. She had a habit of checking her emails first thing, even before her morning coffee. Today, that habit would change everything. Her inbox showed several new messages. Campaign updates, news briefings, and then something unexpected. An email from the production team at The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Karoline sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. She opened the email and read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. "Dear Ms. Leavitt," it began. "We would like to invite you to appear as a guest on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert next Thursday to discuss recent political developments and your role in the campaign." Karoline took a deep breath. At 26, she was already making waves as one of the youngest national press secretaries for a major political campaign. Her confident television appearances and quick responses during press briefings had earned her respect even from political opponents. But this invitation was different. Late-night shows were entertainment as much as news, and Colbert was known for his sharp wit and liberal viewpoints. She got out of bed and started her coffee maker. Her small kitchen overlooked a busy street where people were already hurrying to work. While waiting for her coffee, she called Frank Miller, her communications director and mentor. "Frank, you won't believe what just landed in my inbox," she said when he answered. "Good morning to you too," Frank replied with a yawn. "What is it, Colbert?" "His show wants me on next Thursday." There was a pause on the other end. "Colbert, are you serious?" "Dead serious. The email came in overnight." "That's unexpected," Frank said slowly. "You know that's not exactly friendly territory for us, right?" Karoline poured her coffee into a mug that had the campaign logo on it. "I know. That's what makes it interesting." "Look, let's meet for breakfast and talk about this," Frank suggested. "This needs careful consideration." An hour later, they sat at their favorite Capitol Hill cafe. It was a small place with red checkered tablecloths and strong coffee, a spot where political staffers often gathered but respected each other's privacy. Frank was in his 50s with gray hair and glasses. He had worked in politics for decades and had seen many young stars rise and fall. "I printed out the invitation," Karoline said, sliding a paper across the table. Frank read it carefully. "There. Being very polite, but don't let that fool you. These shows have their own agenda. They want ratings, and nothing gets ratings like conflict." "I know that," Karoline said, stirring her second cup of coffee. "But think about the audience we could reach. Millions of people who might never hear our message otherwise." "Or it could be a trap," Frank warned. "They'll edit whatever happens to make you look bad. Trust me, I've seen it before." A waitress came by to refill their cups. When she left, Karoline leaned forward. "Frank, I didn't get this far by playing it safe. Sometimes you have to step into the lion's den." Frank sighed and rubbed his temples. "You're not going to listen to me on this one, are you?" Karoline smiled. "I always listen to you. I just don't always agree. At least let me help you prepare. If you're going on that show, we need to be ready for anything." They spent the next hour discussing possible questions and the best ways to answer them. Frank played devil's advocate, throwing the hardest questions he could think of at her. Back at campaign headquarters, a large open office with campaign posters on the walls and staff bustling about, Karoline called a meeting with her team. 6 people gathered in the small conference room: 2 speechwriters, a fact-checker, a social media manager, and 2 press assistants. "I've been invited to appear on Colbert," she announced. The room went quiet. "Are you going to do it?" asked Donna Lee, one of the press assistants. She was fresh out of college and looked up to Karoline as a role model. "Yes, I am," Karoline replied firmly. "And I need all of you to help me get ready." Steve Palmer, the head speechwriter, whistled. "That's brave," Colbert can be ruthless. So can I, Karoline said with a smile. But I need to be prepared. Steve, I need talking points on our latest policy announcements. Beth, I need all the recent fact checks we've done. Gary, I want to know what people are saying about us on social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The team nodded, energized by her confidence. They worked late into the evening, preparing materials and running mock interviews. By the time Karoline left the office, it was past 10 p.m., but she felt a buzz of excitement rather than tiredness. The next morning, she sent her official acceptance to the Colbert show. Within an hour, she received a call from the show's producer, a woman named Kate Wilson. "Ms. Leavitt, thank you for accepting our invitation," Kate said. Her voice was professional but warm. "We're looking forward to having you on the show." "Thank you for the opportunity," Karoline replied. "I'm looking forward to it as well." "Great. We'll send over the details about timing, travel arrangements, and what to expect. Is there anything specific you'd like to discuss on the show?" Karoline had been prepared for this question. "I'm happy to talk about our campaign's vision for the future and address any questions Stephen might have." "Wonderful. We aim to have a substantive conversation," Kate assured her. "Our audience appreciates when guests from across the political spectrum share their perspectives." After hanging up, Karoline wondered if Kate was being sincere or if this was part of the setup. Either way, she was committed now. The days passed quickly. Karoline continued her regular duties, press briefings, strategy meetings, media appearances, while also preparing for Colbert. Every night, she watched recent episodes of his show, studying his interview style and how he interacted with political guests, especially those from the opposite side of the political spectrum. The pattern was clear. He started friendly, then gradually increased the pressure until the guest either stumbled or stood their ground. She was determined to be in the second category. The night before her flight to New York, Karoline stayed late at the office reviewing her notes one last time. The building was quiet, most staff having gone home hours ago. She stood by the window, looking out at the Washington Monument, lit up against the night sky. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Just saw the Colbert promos. They're advertising your appearance. Proud of you, kiddo. Remember who you are and what you stand for." Karoline smiled. Her father, a small business owner from New Hampshire, had always been her biggest supporter. He didn't always understand the political world she moved in, but he trusted her judgment. "Thanks, Dad," she texted back. "I'll make you proud." As she gathered her things to leave, Frank appeared at her office door. "You're still here," he observed. "Last-minute preparation," she explained. He nodded. "I figured. I brought you something." He handed her a small box. Inside was a silver pin in the shape of a lion. "To remind you that sometimes the lion tamer is braver than the lion," Frank said with a smile. Karoline pinned it to her lapel immediately. "Thank you. That means a lot." "Just remember," Frank said as they walked out together, "whatever happens on that show, it's just one moment in a long campaign. Don't let them get under your skin." "I won't," she promised. But as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, Karoline couldn't help wondering what she had gotten herself into. The stakes felt suddenly very high. This wasn't just about her. It was about the campaign, the policies she believed in, and the millions of people who supported them. She finally drifted off to sleep with the thought that had driven her throughout her young but impressive career. Some risks were worth taking. This was one of them. Or at least she hoped it was. The flight to New York was smooth. Karoline spent most of it reviewing her notes and watching clips of recent Colbert interviews on her tablet. The airline staff recognized her and kept her coffee cup filled, offering encouraging smiles. By the time the plane touched down at LaGuardia Airport, she felt as ready as she could be. A black car with tinted windows waited for her at the airport. The driver, a middle-aged man named Paul, greeted her politely. "The show sent me to pick you up, Ms. Leavitt. We'll go straight to your hotel, and then to the Ed Sullivan Theater for pre-show preparations at 3 o'clock. Karoline thanked him and settled into the back seat. New York City rushed by outside. The windows, tall buildings, crowded sidewalks, yellow taxis. It was a far cry from the small New Hampshire town where she grew up, or even the more structured pace of Washington, D.C. Her hotel was near the theater, a nice place with a fancy lobby and quick check-in service. The room was larger than she expected, with a view of the city and a fruit basket waiting for her. A card beside the basket read, "Welcome to New York. Looking forward to your appearance on the show. The Late Show team." Karoline unpacked her clothes, carefully hanging up the navy blue blazer she planned to wear for the show. She had chosen it carefully, professional but not too formal, and the color would look good on camera. The lion pin from Frank was all ready, attached to the lapel dot. After a quick lunch from room service, she changed and headed downstairs where Paul was waiting to drive her to the theater. Her stomach felt tight with nerves, but she kept her face calm. Years of press conferences had taught her how to hide anxiety. The Ed Sullivan Theater was busy when she arrived. A line of people waited outside for that evening's show, some holding signs with Colbert's face or catchphrases. A few of them recognized Karoline as she was escorted through a side entrance, and she heard whispers follow her. Inside, a young woman with a clipboard and headset greeted her. "Ms. Leavitt, welcome. I'm Susan Garcia, one of the production assistants. I'll be taking care of you today." Susan led her through a maze of hallways, past busy staff members rushing back and forth. "Here's your green room," she said, opening a door to a comfortable waiting area with a couch, TV, and small table of snacks and drinks. "The makeup team will be here in about 20 minutes. Can I get you anything while you wait?" "Water would be great, thank you," Karoline said, setting her bag down. "Of course. The show rundown is on the coffee table, and there's a bathroom through that door if you need it. I'll be back with your water." Left alone, Karoline picked up the rundown sheet. It showed the schedule for the show, opening monologue, first guest, a movie star promoting a new film, musical performance, and then her segment. She would be on for about 8 minutes, according to the schedule. Susan returned with a bottle of water. "The producer would like to meet you before makeup. Is that okay?" "Of course," Karoline agreed. The producer, Kate Wilson, was the same woman she had spoken to on the phone. In person, she was tall with short brown hair and a quick smile. "Ms. Leavitt, thank you for coming. How was your trip?" "Please call me Karoline." "The trip was fine, thank you," Kate nodded. "Great, so I wanted to go over the general flow of your segment. Stephen will start with some questions about your background and how you got into politics at such a young age. Then we'll move into some of the campaign's recent statements and positions. Does that sound good to you?" "That sounds fine," Karoline said, noting that Kate was being vague about exactly what campaign statements would be discussed. "Wonderful. Stephen likes to keep things conversational, so there's room for the discussion to flow naturally. He does appreciate guests who can match his energy and engagement." "I'll do my best," Karoline said with a small smile. Kate checked her watch. "The makeup team should be ready for you now. After that, we'll do a quick sound check on stage. The audience will start coming in around 5, and we tape at 5:30. As Kate left, Susan appeared to escort Karoline to the makeup room. 2 artists worked on her, applying television makeup that seemed heavy in person, but would look natural on camera. They chatted about the weather and New York restaurants, carefully avoiding politics. After makeup and hair, Karoline did a sound check on the stage. The theater was larger than it looked on television, with bright lights and multiple cameras. She sat in the guest chair while a technician adjusted her microphone and checked sound levels. "Can you count to 10 for me?" the sound technician asked. Karoline counted clearly, trying to get a feel for the space. From this position, she could see the host's desk, the band area, and the audience seating. It felt both exciting and intimidating. Back in the green room, she had about 45 minutes before the show began. She used the time to review her notes one last time and text Frank to let him know everything was going according to schedule. "Remember, stay calm and don't let him rush you," Frank texted back. "You've got this." As the time grew closer, Karoline could hear the audience being seated. The energy in the building changed, more excitement, more noise. Susan brought her a touch-up from makeup and checked that her microphone pack was secure. "You'll be able to watch the show on this monitor," Susan explained, turning on the TV. "In the green room. I'll come get you about 5 minutes before your segment." The show began, and Karoline watched as Colbert came out to enthusiastic applause. His monologue was sharp and political, with several jokes at the expense of her campaign. She noted which topics seemed to get the biggest laughs from the audience. The first guest, a famous actor, was charming and funny. The musical performance was a band she had heard on the radio. And then, all too quickly, Susan was at the door. "We're ready for you, Ms. Leavitt." Karoline stood, straightened her blazer, and touched the lion pin for luck. She followed Susan through the backstage area to the edge of the set, where she could see Colbert at his desk, looking at his notes during the commercial break. A floor director with a headset spotted her. "Ms. Leavitt, you'll enter from this side when Stephen introduces you. Walk to the desk, shake his hand, and then take a seat." Karoline nodded. Her heart was beating faster now, but her face remained composed. From where she stood, she could see part of the audience, a sea of faces, some curious, some already skeptical, in her earpiece. She heard the floor director counting down as the commercial break ended. "And we're back in 5, 4, 3, 2. On the monitor nearby, she watched as Colbert shuffled his notes and looked into the camera. "My next guest is the National Press Secretary for the campaign, one of the youngest to ever hold such a position. Please welcome Karoline Leavitt." The band played as she walked out onto the stage. The lights were even brighter than during the sound check, and the applause was polite but not enthusiastic. She smiled as she approached Colbert, who stood to greet her. His handshake was firm, and his smile seemed genuine enough, though his eyes were evaluating her. "Welcome to the show, Karoline," he said as they both sat down. "Thank you for having me, Stephen," she replied, making sure her voice was clear and confident. "So I have to say, it's brave of you to come on this show," Colbert began. "I mean, I assume your campaign knows where I stand politically." The audience laughed, and Karoline smiled. "Well, I don't see it that way, Stephen. I think Americans deserve to hear different perspectives, even if they don't always agree with them. That's what democracy is all about, right?" "Fair enough." Colbert nodded. "So let's talk about how you got here. You're 26 years old and the National Press Secretary for a major presidential campaign. That's pretty impressive. How did that happen?" This was familiar territory, and Karoline relaxed slightly. "I've always been passionate about politics and public service. After college, I worked on Capitol Hill, then at the White House press office, and now with the campaign. I believe in the work we're doing, and I'm honored to be part of it." Colbert nodded, but there was a shift in his posture that Karoline noticed immediately. The friendly introduction was over. Now the real interview would begin. "Speaking of the work you're doing," Colbert said, leaning forward slightly, "let's talk about some of the statements your candidate has made recently, particularly about what happened in Philadelphia last week." Karoline felt her guard go up. She knew what had happened in Philadelphia, a controversial rally where her candidate had made claims that had been disputed by several news organizations. She had prepared for this, but the sudden pivot in the conversation made it clear. The friendly part of the interview was over. The audience seemed to sense the change too. The room grew quieter, more focused. Colbert's expression remained Pleasant, but his eyes had sharpened. This, Karoline realized, was the lion's den Frank had warned her about, and she was now definitely inside it. Karoline shifted slightly in her chair, crossing her legs and sitting up straighter. The lion pin on her blazer caught the light as she moved. The Philadelphia rally was a great success, she began. Over 15,000 supporters came out to hear about our plans for the economy and national security. Colbert nodded but waved his hand dismissively. Yes, but I'm more interested in the claims your candidate made about voter fraud in the last election. Claims that have been fact-checked and found to be false by multiple news organizations. The audience murmured. Karoline could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her response. She kept her voice steady. Stephen, our campaign stands by those statements. We have evidence that suggests serious irregularities in several counties, and we believe the American people deserve to know about them. Colbert leaned forward. Evidence? What evidence exactly? Because the courts have thrown out every case your team has brought forward. The legal process is ongoing, Karoline replied. And with respect, many mainstream media outlets have been quick to dismiss these concerns without proper investigation. Colbert raised his eyebrows. So you're saying that judges appointed by members of both parties, along with election officials from both parties, and multiple independent fact-checkers are all wrong, and your campaign is right? The audience laughed, and someone clapped. Karoline felt a flash of frustration but kept her face calm. What I'm saying is that we have a responsibility to ensure election integrity, and that means investigating any potential irregularities. That's not a partisan issue. It's about protecting democracy. But when you make claims without solid evidence, aren't you actually undermining democracy? Colbert pressed, not letting her finish her point. Aren't you creating distrust in our electoral system? Karoline tried to respond, but Colbert continued. And let's talk about the video your campaign shared from Philadelphia. The one that supposedly shows ballot tampering, but actually shows standard ballot processing procedures according to county officials. The audience was fully engaged now, some nodding along with Colbert. Karoline could feel the interview slipping away from her. She needed to regain control. With all due respect, Stephen, she said firmly, I'd appreciate the chance to actually answer your questions before you move on to the next one. A few people in the audience made ooh sounds. Colbert looked slightly surprised but gestured for her to continue. The video shows behavior that election experts found concerning. We didn't claim it definitely showed fraud. We said it needed investigation. And I think most Americans would agree that transparency in our elections is important. But when those investigations happen and find nothing, why does your campaign continue to push these narratives? Colbert asked. The investigations have been incomplete, Karoline countered. And many voters still have legitimate concerns that aren't being addressed. Colbert sighed theatrically. So it's a heads I win, tails you lose situation. If investigations find issues, you were right. If they don't find issues, the investigations were biased or incomplete. The audience laughed again, louder this time. Karoline felt her cheeks growing warm, but she kept her composure. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that election security should be something we all care about, regardless of party. Colbert shuffled his note cards. Let's move on to something else. Your candidate recently claimed that crime is out of control in major cities. But FBI statistics show that violent crime has actually decreased in the last 2 years in most urban areas. How do you explain that discrepancy? Karoline felt like she was playing whack-a-mole, with new challenges popping up before she could fully address the previous ones. But this was her job, to stay on message and remain composed under pressure. The statistics don't tell the full story of what people are experiencing in their communities, she said. When we talk to voters, they consistently express concern about public safety, And certain types of crimes, like retail theft and carjackings, have increased dramatically in some cities. So feelings matter more than facts? Colbert asked, raising his eyebrows. People's lived experiences are facts, Karoline responded firmly. And the statistics themselves are more complex than simple up or down trends. Colbert looked at his notes again. Your candidate also said last week that he would cut taxes for everyone if elected. But your own campaign's economic plan only shows tax cuts for the top income brackets. The middle class would see minimal changes, and some analyses suggest lower-income Americans might actually pay more due to changes in deductions. Isn't that misleading? Karoline felt a flicker of irritation. These questions weren't just challenging. They were framed to make her and the campaign look dishonest. She wondered if liberal guests faced similar treatment. That's not an accurate characterization of our plan, she said. Our economic proposals would stimulate growth across all sectors, creating better jobs and opportunities for Americans at every income level. And the specific tax policies you're referring to are still being finalized. So vote for your candidate now and find out what his tax plan actually is later. Colbert quipped, drawing more laughter from the audience. Karoline's patience was wearing thin. That's not what I said, Stephen. Policy development is complex, and we're being thorough. But the principles are clear. We want an economy that works for everyone, not just the coastal elites. Speaking of elites, Colbert said, moving on again before she could elaborate, your candidate has 3 private jets and multiple homes, worth over $50 million combined. How does he connect with the average American worker? The rapid-fire nature of the questions made it impossible to fully answer anything. Karoline knew this was a technique. Keep her off balance, never let her complete a thought, make her look defensive. It was working too. She could feel herself becoming more frustrated. He's been very successful in business, yes, she acknowledged. But he grew up in a middle-class family and worked his way up. He understands what it takes to create jobs and opportunities. His success is actually the American dream in action. Colbert looked skeptical. The American dream of being born rich and getting richer? The audience laughed again. Karoline felt her grip on the armrest tighten. That's not a fair characterization of his background, she said, her voice slightly sharper now. Let's talk about your background, Colbert said, pivoting again. You're 26 years old. Some might say you don't have enough experience for such an important role. Are you just repeating talking points given to you by the campaign, or do you actually believe everything you're saying? The question felt personal, almost insulting. Karoline took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the lion pin on her lapel. I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't believe in what I'm doing, she said evenly. Age doesn't determine conviction or capability. I've worked in politics since college. I understand the issues, and I'm here because I care deeply about the future of this country. But you must admit, Colbert pressed, that your rapid rise is unusual. Some might say it's because you're telegenic and good on camera, rather than because of your expertise. The audience reacted with a mix of sounds, some uncomfortable murmurs, some appreciative noises. Karoline felt something shift inside her. The comment wasn't just challenging her policies or her candidate. It was suggesting she was just a pretty face, not a serious professional. I think that kind of comment, she said slowly, is exactly why many young women hesitate to enter politics. My appearance has nothing to do with my qualifications. I'm in this role because I'm good at what I do. For a moment, the audience was silent. Colbert seemed to realize he might have crossed a line because he nodded and said, "Fair point. Let's get back to policy then." But instead of moving to a substantive policy discussion, he returned to the Philadelphia rally. Your candidate said the media wouldn't show the size of the crowd at that rally. But every major network showed aerial shots of the crowd. Why make such an easily disprovable claim? Karoline felt like they were going in circles. She started to respond, but Colbert interrupted again with another point. The pattern was clear now. He wasn't interested in her answers. He was using her as a prop to score points with his audience. She thought about Frank's warning and her father's text. She thought about the campaign staff who would be watching and the millions of viewers at home. She thought about her own dignity and principles as Colbert launched into yet another question that was really an accusation. Something settled in Karoline's mind. She made a decision that would change the course of the evening and create one of the most talked about television moments of the year. Karoline looked directly at Colbert as he finished his latest question. The studio lights were hot on her face. The audience waited for her response. But instead of answering, she calmly reached up to her lapel microphone. "I think we're done here," she said quietly but firmly. The audience gasped. Colbert blinked, clearly surprised. "Excuse me?" "This isn't an interview," Karoline said, her voice steady. "It's an interrogation. You're not interested in having a real conversation." She began to unclip her microphone. Colbert leaned forward, a mixture of confusion and concern on his face. "Wait, hold on," he said. "We still have more questions to get through." "But I won't get fair chances to answer them," she replied, just loud enough for the boom microphone above to catch her words. The audience was completely silent now, watching the unexpected drama unfold. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically signaling to each other. This was not in the script. "Let's take a deep breath here," Colbert said, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'm just asking questions that I think the audience wants answers to." Karoline paused, microphone now in her hand rather than clipped to her blazer. "You're asking loaded questions and cutting me off before I can fully respond. That might make for good television, but it's not a fair discussion." Murmurs spread through the audience. Some people were nodding in agreement with Karoline. Others looked annoyed at her response. A woman with a headset rushed onto the stage. It was Nancy Wright, the show's executive producer. She spoke quietly, but urgently to Colbert, who nodded and then turned back to Karoline. "We're about to go to a commercial break," he said. "Why don't we reset and continue the conversation afterward? I promise to let you finish your thoughts." Karoline considered this for a moment. Part of her wanted to stay and fight, to prove she could handle whatever Colbert threw at her. But another part recognized that the format itself was designed against her. She thought about what her father would say, what Frank would advise. "I appreciate the offer," she said, standing up. "But I don't think that would change the fundamental dynamic here. Thank you for having me on, but I'm going to leave now." Nancy Wright stepped between Karoline and Colbert, trying to block the camera's view. "Please, Ms. Leavitt, let's discuss this off-air." But Karoline was already walking toward the exit. The floor director signaled frantically to the camera operators to follow Colbert instead of Karoline. "We'll be right back after these messages," Colbert said to the camera, his professional smile back in place despite the unusual situation. As soon as the on-air lights went off, the stage erupted in activity. Nancy Wright followed Karoline backstage, while Colbert remained at his desk, speaking intently with another producer in the backstage area. Susan Garcia looked shocked as Karoline walked past. "Ms. Leavitt, are you okay? What happened out there?" "I'm fine, Susan," Karoline said, "but I'm leaving now." "Could you please call my driver?" Nancy Wright caught up to them in the hallway. "Ms. Leavitt, I understand you're upset, but this is highly unusual. Perhaps we could talk in my office?" Karoline shook her head. "I don't think there's anything to discuss. The format of the show wasn't conducive to a fair exchange of ideas. That became clear very quickly. If you felt that Stephen was being too aggressive, we can adjust for the second segment," Nancy said. "He can tone it down. We want you to feel comfortable." "It's not about comfort," Karoline replied. "It's about respect." If you'd shown interest in a genuine conversation, you wouldn't have prepped him with questions designed to trip me up without allowing time for real answers. Nancy's face tightened slightly. That's not a fair characterization of our show. We'll have to disagree on that, Karoline said as they reached the green room. Inside, she quickly gathered her bag and jacket. Her phone was already filling with notifications, texts from Frank and other campaign staff who must have been watching the show live. She checked one message from Frank. "What's happening? Are you okay?" She texted back quickly, walking out. "We'll call when I'm in the car." By now, word had spread throughout the building. Staff members watched curiously as Nancy Wright escorted Karoline toward the exit. Some looked surprised, others seemed amused by the drama. "This is a mistake," Nancy said in a low voice. "You're going to look like you couldn't handle tough questions." "Maybe to some," Karoline acknowledged. "But others will see it differently." As they reached the side exit, Paul, her driver, was already waiting with the car. News traveled fast. "I hope you'll reconsider and come back inside," Nancy said, making one last attempt. "We could release a joint statement about a misunderstanding and tape a new segment." Karoline shook her head. "Thank you, but no." "Good night, Ms. Wright." She got into the car, and Paul pulled away from the curb. Through the window, she could see Nancy Wright standing on the sidewalk, talking urgently into her headset. Inside the quiet car, Karoline finally let out a long breath. Her hands were shaking slightly, the only visible sign of the stress she had been under. She had never walked out of an interview before. In fact, she had always prided herself on handling difficult questions with grace. "Back to the hotel, Ms. Leavitt?" Paul asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Yes, please," she said. Then she pulled out her phone and called Frank. He answered immediately. "What the hell just happened?" "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said. I walked out. "It wasn't an interview, Frank." "It was an ambush. I'm watching it right now," he said. "They went to commercial, and when they came back, Colbert made some joke about you being unable to stand the heat in the kitchen, and then moved on to his next segment." Karoline wasn't surprised. "They'll spin it however they want. But I wasn't going to sit there and be a punch-in bag." "The campaign office is going crazy right now," Frank said. "Half the staff is cheering you on for standing up for yourself, and the other half is worried about the fallout." "What about the boss?" she asked, referring to the candidate. "Haven't heard yet," Frank admitted. "He was at a fundraiser in Chicago, probably hasn't seen it." Karoline looked out the window at the New York streets passing by. "I don't regret it, Frank. There's a difference between handling tough questions and participating in political theater." "I know," he said. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. But we need to get ahead of this story fast. It's already blowing up on social media." She checked her other notifications and saw he was right. Her name was trending, and clips of her walking off the show were already circulating online, even though the show had just aired on the East Coast. "The campaign's communications team is drafting a statement," Frank continued. "They want your input. Tell them to keep it simple and dignified," she said. "No attacks on Colbert or the show. Just say that I believe in respectful dialogue, and when it became clear that wasn't possible, I chose to leave." "Got it," Frank said. "What's your plan now?" "I'm going back to the hotel. I have a flight back to D.C. in the morning. Should I come to New York?" "I can be there in a few hours." Karoline appreciated the offer but shook her head, even though Frank couldn't see it. "No need, I'm okay really. Let's talk in the morning when we see how this is playing out." After hanging up, she sat quietly as Paul navigated through the evening traffic. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, but she put it on silent. She needed a moment to think. The hotel lobby was quiet when she arrived. She kept her head down, hoping no one would recognize her, and headed straight for the elevators. Inside her room, she kicked off her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. On the TV, she could see that Colbert's show was still airing on the East Coast, now featuring a musical guest as if nothing unusual had happened. Her phone rang. It was her father calling. She took a deep breath and answered. "Hi, Dad." "Karoline," he said, his voice warm with concern and pride. "I just saw what happened. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him, "just tired." "You stood up for yourself," he said simply. "I'm proud of you." His words brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. Remember what I always told you growing up. Sometimes walking away shows more strength than staying in a bad situation." Karoline smiled, touching the lion pin on her blazer. "I remember." After talking with her father, she ordered room service and finally allowed herself to check social media. The reaction was split, as she expected. Some people were calling her thin-skinned and unprofessional. Others were praising her for refusing to be a political prop. What surprised her were the number of young women commenting that they admired her courage. One tweet in particular caught her attention. "Watching that Karoline Leavitt refused to be talked over and walked out instead of being disrespected was the most empowering thing I've seen on TV this year." #Colbert Leavitt. As the hashtag Colbert Leavitt trended higher, Karoline realized that what had felt like a crisis might actually become something else entirely, a defining moment that would shape the rest of her career, for better or worse. Karoline woke early the next morning. Her phone showed over 50 missed calls and hundreds of text messages. The campaign's press team had been working through the night to manage the situation. Before checking any messages, she turned on the television to see how the morning news shows were covering the incident. On one channel, a panel of commentators debated her decision to walk off Colbert's show. "It was unprofessional," said one older man in a suit. "If you can't handle tough questions, you shouldn't be in politics." "I disagree," countered a younger woman. She was being talked over repeatedly. "At some point, you have to stand up for yourself." Karoline switched channels. On another network, they were showing the edited clip that the Colbert show had released late last night. It showed parts of the interview but cut out many of Colbert's interruptions. The clip ended with Colbert saying to the audience, "I guess some people just can't handle tough questions," followed by laughter. Her phone rang. It was Frank. "Morning," she answered. "I'm guessing you haven't slept much." "Not really," Frank admitted. "But things are moving fast. The campaign released our statement at midnight. The boss called me directly at 1 a.m. after seeing the clips." Karoline held her breath. "And he supports you completely," Frank said. His exact words were, "Good for her." That took guts. Karoline felt relief wash over her. The candidate's opinion mattered more than any social media reaction. "What's the plan now?" she asked. "That's why I'm calling. We've received interview requests from every major network. They all want your side of the story. And this is important. The Late Show posted their own edited clip last night that makes you look bad. But we have something they don't know about." "What's that?" Karoline asked. "Susan Garcia, the production assistant, reached out to me. She was upset about how they treated you and how they're spinning it now. She secretly recorded audio on her phone during your segment. It captures all the times Colbert cut you off that weren't shown in their clip. She's willing to let us use it." Karoline was surprised. "That's unexpected. Is it legal for us to use that?" "Our lawyers are checking," Frank said. "But even if we can't release the audio, just having it gives us leverage. We know the truth about what happened. So what's our next move?" she asked, already getting out of bed and beginning to pack. "Your flight back is in 3 hours. When you land in D.C., we want you to do one sit-down interview with a network that will give you time to tell your side fairly. We're thinking Maria Bell's show on NBS." Karoline nodded to herself. Maria Bell was known for being tough but fair to guests from both political parties. "That sounds good. What about social media?" Right now it's running about 60-40 in your favor, Frank reported. The hashtag Colbert Leavitt is still trending, and a new one started overnight. Hashtag respect Karoline. It's especially strong among women in their 20s and 30s. After finishing her call with Frank, Karoline quickly packed and checked out of the hotel. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed people looking at her and whispering. Her face had been all over the news this morning. On the ride to the airport, Paul the driver was friendlier than before. You know, he said, my daughter watched that show last night. She's 19, not really into politics. But she told me this morning that seeing you stand up for yourself made her proud. Said it reminded her of what I always tell her about respecting herself. Karoline smiled. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. At the airport, several people recognized her. An older woman stopped her near the security line. I don't agree with your politics, the woman said frankly, but I respect how you handled yourself last night. Too many young women let themselves be talked over by men. The flight back to Washington was uneventful, but when she landed, she found Frank waiting for her at the gate, looking tired but excited. The story's gotten bigger, he said as they walked quickly through the terminal. The unedited footage from the show leaked online an hour ago. Was it Susan? Karoline asked. Frank shook his head. No, it came from someone else in the production team. And it shows everything, all the interruptions, the dismissive comments, everything. The tide of public opinion is shifting even more in your favor. By the time they reached campaign headquarters, the story had taken another turn. The Late Show had released a new statement, saying they regretted that Ms. Leavitt felt uncomfortable during her appearance, but standing by their interviewing approach. In response, 3 former guests on the show, including a liberal senator, had come forward with stories about similar experiences, saying the show edited interviews to make guests look bad if they didn't align with Colbert's politics. The campaign office was buzzing with activity when Karoline walked in. Staff members applauded, and some of the younger team members rushed up to express their support. The campaign manager, a serious man named Greg, who rarely showed emotion, gave her a nod of approval. The boss wants to see you, he said. He's calling in 5 minutes from Chicago. In the privacy of her office, Karoline took the video call from the candidate. He looked energetic as always, his signature red tie perfectly knotted. Karoline. He greeted her warmly. You've caused quite a stir. I'm sorry if it's created problems for the campaign, she began, but he waved her apology away. Don't apologize. You showed exactly the kind of backbone we need. The media thinks they can push us around, talk over us, edit us to look stupid. You proved them wrong. Thank you, sir, she said, relieved. I want you to do that interview with Maria Bell, he continued. Be calm, be professional, but don't back down. This is resonating with voters, especially women voters. Our internal polling already shows a 3-point bump overnight. After the call ended, Karoline met with the communications team to prepare for her interview with Maria Bell, scheduled for that evening. They practiced potential questions and reviewed the full footage from the Late Show. As evening approached, Karoline arrived at the NBS studios in Washington. The atmosphere was noticeably different from Colbert's show, more serious, less entertainment-focused. Maria Bell, a veteran journalist in her 50s with short gray hair, greeted Karoline herself. Thank you for coming, she said, shaking Karoline's hand firmly. I want to assure you that while I'll ask tough questions, you'll have time to answer them fully. Fair? That's all I ask, Karoline replied. The interview was indeed challenging but fair. Maria asked about Karoline's decision to walk off, about the campaign's controversial statements, and about policy positions. But unlike Colbert, she listened to the answers, followed up when appropriate, and maintained a respectful tone throughout. When the interview aired at 9 o'clock, the response was immediate. Social media exploded with comparisons between Colbert's approach and Bell's, with many praising the latter as real journalism versus gotcha entertainment. By the following morning, the narrative had completely shifted. What could have been, portrayed as a young press secretary cracking under pressure, was now being widely seen as a woman standing up against unfair treatment. Karoline's social media following had tripled overnight. A week later, Karoline sat in Frank's office, reviewing the aftermath of what people were now calling the Colbert incident. "The final numbers are in," Frank said, looking at his tablet. "Your interview with Maria Bell had double the viewers of your Colbert segment. You've received invitations from 17 other shows, including 3 international ones. And most importantly, our campaign message is getting through clearly. Now." Karoline nodded. "And The Late Show?" "Their ratings spiked for that episode but have dropped since. They've quietly changed their interview format, giving guests more time to answer. And 3 more former guests have come forward with similar stories." Outside Frank's office, campaign staffers were busy preparing for a major rally in Detroit the following week. Karoline's role had expanded. The candidate wanted her to introduce him at the rally, her first time speaking to a crowd. That large dot as she left the office that evening, Karoline noticed a small package on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note from her father and a small lion figurine similar to the pin she had worn on The Late Show. The note read simply, "Sometimes the right path is walking away. Sometimes it's standing your ground. You knew the difference. Keep roaring, kiddo." Karoline smiled and placed the lion figurine on her desk, where it would remain throughout the campaign and beyond. A reminder that sometimes what seems like a crisis can become the defining moment that shapes a career and changes the conversation for many others too. The incident would later be referenced in journalism schools across the country as a case study in the evolving relationship between politics and entertainment in modern America, and as a turning point in how female political figures expected to be treated in media appearances. For Karoline Leavitt, it was the moment she became more than just a spokesperson. She became a voice that others, especially young women, were eager to hear.